Imagine a moment in your life when everything changes in an instant. One story, one lesson, one simple demonstration. Could that shift the way you see your entire existence? It's a question that many of us never ask, but today I'll share a story that will help you answer that for yourself. In a small, serene village far from the rush of modern life, a wise monk came to teach, and what he had to say about life, priorities, and how we fill our days might just change your perspective forever. Stay with me till the end of this story because the lesson you'll learn could transform the way you live your life. It's time to think about what really matters. It was a warm afternoon when the villagers gathered in the heart of their small community. The sun was beginning to dip low on the horizon, casting a gentle golden light over the modest homes and the simple lives of the people. The air was thick with the scent of fresh earth and wood. The villagers had heard rumors that a wise monk, known for his deep wisdom and unorthodox teaching methods, was coming to their village. For weeks they had anxiously awaited his arrival, eager to learn the secret of his teachings that had touched many lives across the land. On the day he arrived, the monk didn't come in the usual way. He wasn't cloaked in ornate robes or surrounded by followers. Instead, he walked quietly into the village with only a humble wooden staff and a large, empty glass jar tucked under his arm. Curiosity spread like wildfire. The villagers gathered around, intrigued by the unusual sight. What could this jar represent? What wisdom was about to unfold? The monk smiled, nodded to the villagers, and made his way into the village temple, a humble structure but a sacred place for the people. There, he set the jar down in the middle of the floor, surrounded by benches where the villagers took their seats. With a calm, deep breath, the monk began his teaching. He didn't speak at first. His presence alone seemed to command attention. Then he reached into a cloth bag and pulled out several large stones, each about the size of his fist. He carefully placed them one by one into the jar, filling it to the top. The stones made a soft clinking sound as they settled into place. When the jar appeared full, the monk paused and turned to the villagers. "Is the jar full?" he asked, his voice steady and inviting. The villagers, seeing no space left for anything else, nodded in unison. "Yes, master, the jar is full." The monk smiled slightly, his eyes twinkling with a deeper understanding. Then, with a gentle motion, he reached into another bag and pulled out a smaller pouch, this one filled with pebbles, each one smaller than the stones. He began pouring the pebbles into the jar, shaking the jar gently as they cascaded into the spaces between the larger stones. The pebbles fit snugly into the gaps, making the jar appear even fuller than before. "Now is the jar full?" the monk asked again. The villagers hesitated, some still unsure, but many, having already grasped a glimpse of the lesson, responded cautiously, "Yes, master, it is full." The monk nodded but didn't stop there. He reached into yet another bag and pulled out a pouch of fine, dry sand. He began to pour the sand into the jar, the tiny grains slipping into the crevices between the pebbles and stones, filling every last empty space. Finally, the monk asked one last time, "Is the jar full now?" The villagers looked at each other, some shaking their heads, others unsure of how much more could possibly fit. They spoke as one, "No, master, it is not full yet." The monk smiled widely this time. He reached for a jug of water he had placed quietly on the floor and began pouring it into the jar. The water soaked into the sand, filling every last space until the jar was completely full. And then the monk asked, "Now is the jar full?" The villagers were silent for a moment. They knew now that the monk's lesson was much deeper than they initially thought. "Yes, master," they said together. The monk's eyes softened with understanding. He looked at the villagers, his gaze steady and profound. "Now let me explain what this jar represents," he began. "In this jar, you see the stones. These are the most important things in your life, things that are essential to your happiness and fulfillment. These stones represent your family, your health, your friends, and your deepest passions, the things that truly make your life meaningful. If you lose everything else but you have these stones, your life will still be rich and full." The villagers listened intently, some nodding in recognition. These were the things that mattered most to them: the love of their families, their health, the close friendships they had built over the years. The monk continued, "The pebbles represent the things that are important, but not as essential as the stones: your work, your house, your car, your financial stability. These are the things that make life comfortable, but they do not define who you are." The monk's voice grew softer, more contemplative. "And the sand?" "The sand represents all the little trivial things, the distractions of life, the everyday tasks that consume your attention. These are the to-do lists, the small worries that make up your daily routine. These things seem urgent, but in the grand scheme of life, they don't carry much weight." The monk paused for a moment, letting his words settle in the hearts of the villagers. "Lastly, the water. The water represents the moments of joy, connection, and relaxation. It's the spontaneous moments with loved ones, a cup of tea shared with a friend, the peace you feel after a hard day's work, the laughter of a child. These moments are what make life beautiful. They don't always fit neatly into your schedule, but they are essential for your well-being." The monk looked deeply into the eyes of each villager, his voice steady and powerful. "Now let me ask you a question. What would happen if you filled your jar with sand and pebbles first? If you spent all your time focusing on the little tasks and the distractions of life?" A murmur ran through the crowd. One villager spoke up. "There would be no room left for the stones." The monk nodded. "Exactly. If you fill your life with distractions, if you let the small things dominate your time and energy, there will be no space for what truly matters. The stones will be crowded out. Your family, your health, your dreams will be pushed aside. The mundane tasks will take up all your time, leaving you empty." As I sit here reflecting on the monk's lesson, I realize how often I, too, have filled my life with pebbles and sand. How often have I let my job, the endless tasks, or even my worries take precedence over the things that truly matter? There was a time in my own life when I worked relentlessly, thinking that success and achievements would bring happiness. But I neglected the stones. I spent little time with my family, barely took care of my health, and didn't pursue my true passions. It wasn't until I hit a moment of personal reckoning that I realized nothing else matters if you don't have the stones in place first. And that's when I made a conscious decision to change. I started prioritizing the stones, my relationships, my health, and my dreams. Slowly, I began to feel the weight lifting from my shoulders. My life became fuller, richer, and infinitely more meaningful. But there's more. The monk reminded us that even when your life seems full, there's always room for the water, the moments of joy, connection, and peace. These moments don't compete with the stones, pebbles, or sand. They fill the spaces, refreshing your soul and bringing light into your life. I've found that no matter how busy I am, there is always time for a cup of tea with a friend or a quiet walk in nature. These moments nourish the spirit in ways that nothing else can. There was a merchant in a distant town who spent his entire life in pursuit of wealth and success. He worked tirelessly, believing that wealth would bring him happiness. But over time, he noticed that his family became distant, his health declined, and he felt a deep emptiness inside. One day, he encountered an old sage who told him the very story of the jar. The sage explained how the merchant had filled his life with pebbles and sand, leaving no room for the stones. The merchant was struck by the wisdom and decided to change his ways. He spent more time with his family, took better care of his health, and began pursuing his true passions. In the end, the merchant found a richness in life that money could never buy. As the monk finished his teaching, he looked at each of us and reminded us to prioritize the stones, our families, our health, our passions. These are the true treasures of life. Fill your jar with these first, and then let the pebbles, sand, and water fall into place. Remember, it's not about how much you can fit into your life, but what you choose to fill it with. The stones are what define your true essence, your happiness, and your fulfillment. Choose wisely. Now take a moment to reflect. What are the stones in your life? What are the things that truly matter to you? Are you prioritizing them? Or are you allowing the pebbles and sand to take up all your time? Let this lesson be a guide as you move forward. Make time for your stones first, and everything else will fall into place. Thank you for watching. I hope this story has inspired you to rethink the way you live your life. Until next time, remember to prioritize the stones.